Hello, Mr. Hood and classmates. Today, Annette, Erazo, Jamilah and Cecilia Zapata will be analyzing the poem Ariel by Sylvia Plath. Firstly, the poem goes as follows. Stasis in darkness, then the substanceless blue pour of torrent distances. God's Lyonese, how one we grow, pivot of heels and knees, the furrow splits and passes, sister to the brown arc of the neck I cannot catch. Nigger eye, berries catch dark hooks, black sweet blood mouthfuls, shadows, something else hauls me through air, thighs, hair, flakes from my heels, white Godiva, I unpeel, dead hands, dead stringencies, and now I foam to wheat, a glitter of seas, the child's cry melts in the wall, and I am the arrow, the dew that flies suicidal at one with the drive into the red, I, the cauldron of morning. To begin with, this is the summary of the poem. This poem is one of the most enigmatic works by Sylvia Plath, and this is thanks to her all-throughout metaphor usage in this poem. This poem, overall, is about her riding a horse through the night at first, but then the sun starts to rise. Dark things start to appear in her journey, representing something negative that is holding her back, but that she tastefully embraces as she continues riding her horse. She describes such embrace with her peeling or suddenly being naked, thus accepting the dark side of her pathway. Finally, she ends the poem with her being like an arrow, ready to be enveloped by a new phase of her soul represented by the morning sky, ready to embrace her suicidal tendencies and finish her life. The main events of the poem are as follows. The narrator is riding a horse at night, firstly. Then the sun starts to rise, but at the same time, darkness appears, representing all of the negative things in the narrator's life. Some of the darkness that appears are when she describes the shadows and the black berries. The narrator then starts to embrace such negativity and goes on in her pathway. Then, the narrator describes herself as an arrow, ready to fly into the red, embracing her suicidal thoughts and about to enter the morning sky, a new phase of her soul. Literal meaning and theme. In this poem, there were various words that we were not able to understand. Thus, we were able to define the literal meaning of such words. Stasis is a period or state of equilibrium or inactivity. Tor is a hill or rocky peak. Furrow is a long trench made in the ground for planting seeds and irrigation. Godiva is an English earl's wife who in legend rode naked to save its citizens from attacks. And stringencies is a rigorously binding, strict, severe. Themes. There are various themes that the poem contains. Some of these are as follows. The main theme of the poem is death, since she is accepting her death at the end of the poem, embracing it once the sun births from the horizon and her being an arrow being shot towards that sun. Discovery is another theme of the poem, since she discovers her desire for death once she starts to peel herself. New beginnings of another phase of her soul after death is another main theme of this poem. The title of the poem can definitely make us know what the poem is about. So, the title of the poem represents the name of her horse, the one she is riding throughout the poem. This was confirmed by her husband Ted Hughes. Sylvia Plath at one point in her life had a horse named Ariel, and that's why it's a main character in her poem, and that's why she uses it to describe her feelings. The central purpose of the poem is to express the thoughts going on in her mind. Sylvia Plath is a confessional poet, so her poems generally contain her actual feelings and emotions. She uses this poem as an escape in her mind to express her suicidal thoughts, and she uses her horse Ariel as a tool to express such emotions. The tone. At the beginning of the poem, the tone is very depressive and fearful, but the poet then develops a more ecstatic and hopeful tone throughout the poem. The mood that this poem transmits to the reader is of confusion and pity, due to the fact that the poet starts being very literal, but then becomes a metaphoric being with suicidal thoughts that will enter a new phase of her soul. By literal, we mean she describes the physicality of herself riding the horse and of the horse itself as well. But then she becomes more metaphoric at the end when she describes herself as an arrow, ready to be shot towards the sun, which represents her death, her suicide, and her suicidal tendencies, which she is slowly enveloping once she starts to peel herself or getting naked. The speaker is Sylvia Plath herself. She is writing in first person and describes her thoughts throughout the poem towards her desire to die. There is no specific audience or speaker. This poem is not aimed for anyone in specific, since Plath is just expressing her feelings towards her life, towards what life has brought her. Next, we have the structure of the poem. Ariel is written in free verse, which means that it does not have a clear rhyme scheme. Plath's poem is organized into tercets, or three-line stanzas, and Plath's lines are almost all short and clipped. The poem itself is 31 lines long, making it fast to read. Ariel is also known for its enjambments, or line breaks that end before the finished thought, pulling the reader along into the next line. Therefore, the poem, even though it has its clips, the fact that it has some sort of fluidity makes the reader want to read more and more, and makes the reader read more at ease. The sound and rhyme of the poem. The poem is written in free verse, meaning that there is no clear rhyme scheme. Despite this, Sylvia Plath does add into the poem occasional rhyming words, adding fluidity into the poem. Examples: darkness and lioness or lioness. The sound of the poem is better heard while the poem is being read aloud, since that is when you can fully hear the repetition and sounds that are in this poem. Thus, the poem does have some sort of musicality to it. Language and imagery of Ariel. Firstly, there are not many details of the setting of the poem. All we know is that it occurs in an open area where we can see the mysterious red sun, representing death, rising. It occurs before dawn. And the occasion is her suicide or embrace of her desire to die or to commit suicide. The language of the poem. Sylvia uses complex words in a random way throughout the poem in order to distract the reader from its true meaning, representing such meaning with her riding this horse. She does this when she uses suicidal at one with the drive into the red. She uses various exclamation points, dashes, semicolons, and commas. These punctuations are significant since she uses them to make the reader keep on going and to emphasize a specific word or line that is connected to the meaning of the poem. She does this, for instance, by using exclamation points. The imagery of Ariel. This poem uses a lot of imagery in order to give significance to the meaning of the poem. It also helps the reader reach a conclusion as to what is happening in the poem, thus helping the reader to discover the true meaning of the poem itself. The following quotes of the poem have imagery. Stasis in darkness, then the substanceless blue. Shows imagery since it describes the darkness of the sky before she rides her horse, before dawn. Something else hauls me through air, thighs, hair. Describes the image of the horse by describing the body of the horse, taking her close to death or the sun. And I am the arrow, the dew that flies suicidal at one with the drive into the red. Uses imagery when she compares herself with an arrow that is getting closer and closer to the bloody red sun that represents her desire to die. Finally, here are some literary devices that are in the poem Ariel by Sylvia Plath. The child's cry melts into the wall is a hyperbole, which emphasizes how fast the rider of the horse is moving forward and emphasizes how disconnected she feels with the world. Metaphor, I am the arrow. This is a metaphor for the increase in power this person feels. Personification, shadows haul me through the air, is an example of personification used to emphasize the fearful mood of the poem, and she does this by giving the human quality of shadows to haul her or to grab her, to push her through the air. Assonance, flies suicidal. This is used to create a dynamic pace. Paradox, stasis and darkness. This is a contradictory statement since stasis is inactivity, equilibrium, and darkness does not have inactivity. It is a very active substance of an element of the world. Understatement, at one with the drive, is an understatement. It makes the writer sound in control, when in reality she's controlled by the power of the horse and has no control over its direction or speed. Irony. The entire mood of the poem is ironic. The poem changes the typical understanding of a horse ride as calm and relaxing, and instead presents it as a terrifying and chaotic manner, since the meaning of the poem is her death. Therefore, it is not calming and relaxing at all, much like normal horse ridings are. Allusion. The poem contains a historical allusion to Lady Godiva, an Anglo-Saxon woman who rode naked on a horse. This parallels the character's situation and raises ideas of beauty and power. This has been our analysis of the poem Ariel by Sylvia Plath. Thank you very much for paying attention and for your time.